Hi everyone, this is Pastor Dan from Calvary Chapel, Cle Elum in Washington. Starting a new series today as we continue on in our exploration of this wonderful book of Philippians. I had a tough time coming up with a title that would get people's attention, but I finally settled on Joy, Hardship, and Furthering the Gospel from Philippians 1:12-18. I know it's not a very catchy title, but if you'll stay with me over the next few weeks, I think you'll get a lot out of it. First, I'll read the passage, and then I'll take the time today to introduce it and let you know the direction that we'll be headed. Philippians 1:12-18 says, "But I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard, to all the rest, that my chains are in Christ. And most of the brethren in the Lord, having become confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ, even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. The former preach Christ from selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my chains, but the latter out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. What then, verse 18? Only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice, yes, and will rejoice." Folks, everyone wants joy. Everyone wants to be able to rejoice in life. Everyone wants this, but most of us are probably looking for it in the wrong place. We frequently assume that joy derives from favorable conditions. Therefore, we seek out to better our conditions. If you're single, perhaps you're looking for a partner and a good marriage in the hopes that it will provide you joy. You might believe that getting a divorce and finding someone else will make you happy if you're married but unhappy. If you're a married couple who haven't been able to have children, you might think that having kids will make you happy. If you're married with rebellious children, young or old, you might think getting as far away from the kids as possible will bring you joy. I recently read a funny anecdote about raising children. It stated that we usually spend the first 2 years of their life trying to get them to walk and talk, and then the following 16 years attempting to get them to sit down and be quiet. When you're destitute, you often want to become wealthy. If you're wealthy, you realize that money doesn't buy what you need. Somebody once said that it's better to be poor and happy than rich and unhappy. Somebody else wondered, hey, is it possible to be middle income with a mid-level amount of joy? Jesus actually gave us the recipe for lasting joy, but unfortunately most people reject it out of hand. He said in Mark 8:34, "Whoever desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." As you can imagine, that didn't attract any crowds, except those who wanted to kill him, probably. Jesus went on in Mark 8:35, "Whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will find it." He made the same argument in the Sermon on the Mount when he compared pagans who seek temporal comforts with believers who are to seek first his kingdom and righteousness, then all these things shall be added unto you. Matthew 6:33. Jesus' words were put to the test by the Apostle Paul in the cauldron of life. In this section from Philippians, we find Paul submerged in a set of circumstances that could really help us to understand if he might have been a bit cranky at times. Consider just exactly who Paul was. He was God's principal Gentile apostle. He was schooled. He was qualified and formidable. He established churches throughout the Roman Empire. He was being used by God to write a large portion of the New Testament. In his labors for the Lord, he had faced much tribulation and hardship. He was over 60 years old by this point, at a time in his life when a man looks forward to reaping the rewards of his life's work. By this time, many American pastors are looking forward to a relaxing schedule, working at their own pace on some project, or perhaps playing a bit of golf. If you are as successful in ministry as Paul was, you might expect to live off of book sales and speak at several conventions and retreats. But where had Paul gone? Instead of playing golf, working in his workshop, or chatting amid the pines at a retreat center, he was imprisoned in Rome, pending a trial that could lead to his being killed for something he didn't do. Now, granted, he wasn't in the worst of all possible situations, like he would be a couple of years later when he'd be confined in an actual dungeon awaiting his execution. He was actually in his own rented residence, and his friends were permitted to pay him visits. However, he was under Roman guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He was chained to a different guard every 6 hours, 4 different guards for every 24-hour period. He had already been imprisoned in Caesarea for 2 years for no crime of his own. On his way to Rome, he was in a shipwreck and nearly drowned. Not only that, but he was being harshly chastised by a number of jealous preachers in Rome who were probably saying things like, "Do you think Paul would be in prison if he had God's blessing in his life?" They were advocating their missions at the expense of Paul. Paul's circumstances should have been enough to make any man unhappy, but we find him brimming with delight in Philippians 1:18. "What then," he says, "only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is preached, and notice, in this I rejoice, yes, and will rejoice." How was he able to do this? How could Paul be joyful in these bleak circumstances? The answer is that he had decided to take Jesus at his word and begin to practice the things that Jesus had taught. That's the only way to find true fulfilling life, is to lose it for the sake of Jesus and the gospel. Keep in mind that Paul was very focused. He didn't think in terms of doubles, triples, or quadruples. He was single-minded. Philippians 1:21 says, "For me to live is Christ. Nothing more, nothing less." Everything turned on living for Christ and the gospel, as well as serving Christ and the gospel. Unlike most of us, his primary goal was not to make life more pleasant and carefree for himself. It was about serving the people of God and serving God himself. And that involved doing everything he could to help the unsaved know Christ in the same manner that he did. Advancing the gospel is what brought Paul ultimate fulfillment. Nothing else came even a close second. When we begin to see the value of prioritizing the spreading of the gospel and spreading God's love every chance we get, that's when genuine joy will come to us. You might be thinking, "Well, that's cool for you, but I don't really see how that fits with me. I haven't been called to be an evangelist, pastor, or missionary. I'm just a regular Joe. I work hard to make a living and raise my family. But unlike Paul, I am not called to spread the gospel." However, I believe that Jesus' teachings apply not only to the Apostle Paul, but to every Christian from every walk of life. Whether you're a construction worker, a company executive, a housewife, a student, or anything else, your goal should be to lose your life for the cause of Christ and the gospel. By doing so, you will discover the key to authentic life and permanent joy, regardless of the struggles or tribulations you endure. Now, next week we'll consider how Paul's perspective on life shaped his circumstances and not the other way around. So I hope you'll join me for that. Once again, I hope this has been an encouragement to you. If it has, would you do me a favor? Give it a like, a comment, share it on your own Facebook page, and if you're watching on the Calvary Chapel Cle Elum YouTube channel, would you subscribe to the channel? If you're in the Cle Elum area and you don't have a home church, would you consider joining us on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at 417 East Railroad Street in Cle Elum, Washington? Again, this is Pastor Dan from Calvary Chapel Cle Elum. Thanks for joining me today. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And I look forward to us getting together again next week. In Jesus' name.